Welcome back, Camden. Sorry, Josie, I didn't mean to scare you. Oh, welcome back, Camden Catholic. Sorry about that. I was talking to my wife's dog, and she got a little nervous when I clapped. But I know it's the weekend, but we do have to get moving. Remember, as of right now, your test is next Friday. We'll probably be working on a lot of your study guide stuff and things like that on the days leading up to that, because I know we have all this crazy retreat stuff going on. However, let's go ahead and get into it. So, we're finishing up with like the tumultuous Middle Ages conflict, talking about the 100 Years' War, right? Now, when you're going to talk about the 100 Years' War, you got to be able to kind of focus and reference on why it actually started in the first place. And it actually has everything to do with this, right? Mainly the death of this guy right here, Philip IV of France, right? Because here's what ended up happening in the long run. Oh, sorry about that. Man. So, what ends up going down is actually, excuse me, not Philip IV of France, but Philip V of France. So, what ends up going down is the entire infrastructure of the French crown is going to deteriorate, right? So, following the lineage system, right, of a monarchy, who inherits the throne every time you die? Exactly, your son, right? So, now, here's the thing you need to write down really, really quickly, which will expose a lot of why this thing actually occurred. Write this down. It's Salic law, S-A-L-I-C law. And what Salic law in the old Middle Ages said, that no woman could inherit the throne, and that no, inheritance could never be matrilineal, right? Like, for example, if a woman was next in line to take the throne, it could not just jump over her and go to her son. That's what Salic law means and how it's constructed, okay? So this family, funny enough, actually was married into another family completely separate. That actually is the the ruling family of England at the time, right? So now let's go ahead and get into it. So this line of monarchs right here actually all unfortunately died without sons to take the throne from them, right? When Charles here dies, it actually only leaves one person eligible to take over. And it's this guy, Philip VI of France, because his nephew, Edward III, lives in England, right? So going into it though, there it is. The 100 Years' War is going to last from about 1347 to 1453. Now some of y'all already have some red flags up and you're like, wait a minute, that's like 116 years. You're right, it is about 116 years. The math isn't appropriate right there, but the conflict itself actually did last for close to 116 years. Your major players are Philip VI of France and Edward III of England, right? So Edward III being the King of England, Philip VI being the future King of France. So Philip VI is going to take the throne after the death of his cousin, Charles. He is Philip Valois, all right? He's of the Valois family. So he is actually a cousin of the king that has just died, Charles IV, right? So Edward, though, even though he lives in England, feels that he should control France since he owns land there, and he is related to Charles by blood. So if I zoom in right here on this map, see this little green region down here? It's called Aquitaine, right? So England actually owned that small landholding because of Edward's mom. Edward's mom was related to the King of France that just had died, right? That's his sister. But really quickly, what happens to all these marriages and these families and things like that? His sister Isabella, the king that had just died, Charles, right? His cousin Charles, his sister Isabella, Edward's mother, had actually been married off to the King of England at the time for diplomatic reasons, right? So, due to that thing called Salic law, it said that Edward had no right to inherit the throne. So, the people of France and the nobles actually agreed to give the throne to Philip VI, right? So, usually what happens in this situation, because it actually has occurred multiple times in the medieval period leading up to this point, 9 times out of 10 what actually ends up happening is all the person must do, all Edward must do is say that his lands there are subject to Philip VI. And he says, no, I want to be king, this is lame. And so Philip says, shut up, and then actually confiscates his lands from him completely, leading to the 100 Years' War. So war erupts over this entire teeny, tiny little thing right here in Aquitaine. That was really it, right? But here's the other thing, too. A big cause, it's money, right? So during this period of the Middle Ages, economics are beginning to come back. Capitalism is beginning to come back. Lords are taking their money and investing it back into their land and actually trying to do something with it to make more money in the long run. I really like how I got like this light streaming in for the window. It looks kind of cool. So going into it though, that was one minor reason, right? So it was the increased funds and things like that. And also things are going to get real shaky when it all comes down to money, right? So as you can see looking at this map though, green being the English land holdings, orange being the French. English are like, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. The English are early on kicking butt in this war, actually growing and expanding their lands and actually moving forward. And some important details you need to know about the 100 Years' War going forward, right? First and foremost, it lasted for 116 years, which we already just brought up anyway. Also, second thing, there was a ton of times of peace. So a lot of people immediately think like, oh man, Mr. Terry, like 116 years of war? You could have been born and dead in that one war. Yeah, there actually is, I think, like the numbers are close to 5 or 6 different kings that actually occupied the thrones for either England and France at any one given moment throughout this war, right? Like you're talking about huge lines of monarchs that came through. One of them was a guy named Edward the Black Prince, which was actually Edward's son, right? He would have been Edward IV, but he actually ended up dying before his father. He was called the Black Prince because of the black armor that he would actually wear into battle. And so, crazy thing about it is, it lasts for 116 years. There's no way, physically speaking, that you're going to be able to fight 116 straight years of war. It makes no sense, right? So what ended up happening is actually there were really only 9 big battles, right? So 100 years, 9 battles. Like, so one of them was naval early on when the English actually took control of the English Channel, and the rest of them were mostly like land battles, okay? So, and the reason why there was those long truces is because wars cost a ton of money, right? Each side kept running out of money. Each side kept having to beg other allies for money. There's a lot of big issues. Also, some major weapons are going to make some debuts, right? So let's go ahead and jump to those major weapons really quick. The major weapons that are going to make their debuts, looking at these weapons really quickly, which one of you thinks you can guess which is the more technologically advanced weapon? Brandon, I like your answer. But sorry, man. I know this thing over here looks like it's more technologically advanced, right? That right there is a French crossbowman, right? So one of the reasons why the French were losing early on is because they still used these things. Crossbows in the medieval era took a long time to reload with this hand crank. If you lost the hand crank, you couldn't reload your weapon anymore. And also, the bolts, which is what they were referred to as, the arrows, are much shorter and only travel a short distance, right? Whereas the English right here actually pioneered the longbow, right? The longbow was a massive invention that actually really helped the English out because they would just rain down just seas of arrows on top of the French, decimating their forces from over 200 yards away. One huge battle, actually, I believe it was at Agincourt, was when literally the Frenchmen tried to storm and they were like, you know what, we're going to take the longbows away from them and we're just going to charge the open field. But what had actually happened is it rained the weeks before, and so it was really muddy. And so the Frenchmen actually got stuck in the mud, and then the English longbow were like, all right then, and just like let them fly, and then just rain down arrows on guys that were just trudging through the mud as fast as they could, right? So these two weapons are really huge. But in the long run, France will end up winning, all right? Spoiler alert, France wins, right? And a lot of it has to do with the development of gunpowder-based weapons, right? So the Chinese had gunpowder for years before the Europeans ever even knew what it was, right? Well, the French are actually going to perfect the method of using it. Why do I always pick up a glass and then never drink out of it? So, getting into it, though, they actually developed and pioneered the use of cannons, and this bad boy right here, one of the earliest and most rudimentary guns, right? So early guns actually just looked like that, just a metal tubing. This actually was used as a like proxy weapon, almost like a bayonet, or also could be used as like a siege weapon as well. So these like gunpowder weapons were actually one of the big key reasons why the French were actually able to just kind of win the war in the long run, right? So getting back, whoa, go back on, nope. All right, there we go. Also, number 4, another big detail you need to know is that English was crushing France for most of this war, right? So it really just kind of got strung together, 3 battles at the end that actually ended up allowing France to win the entire thing. Also allying with Scotland, you know, a little pincer move, trying to come in from the top and the bottom of the English at the same time. Also, 5, the alliances were very messy. And what I mean by that is the fact that England was actually for quite some time allied with these people known as the Burgundians, all right? The people of Burgundy in France, right? So England was actually allied with some of France to fight the rest of France. And then France actually allied with Scotland, which is actually on the same island as England. So it's a very, very messy alliance system. But we're not going to get into that too much because this war is really honestly kind of just... The biggest thing about this war is it actually separated England and France permanently from one another, kind of really brought standardization to the English language, and made it so the nobility of England kind of stopped speaking French in a diplomatic fashion and actually converted over to their English language. It also kind of solidified England as being an island country all on its own, right? Completely separate of the continent. So, really quick though, war breaks out in 1337, fought on and off again until 1453, right? So, France is going to win after aligning with Scotland and reconciling with their wealthy region of Burgundy. So Burgundy actually originally fought against the French crown, took a lot of regions away from them because they saw a big chance to actually make a lot of money. Because in Burgundy, actually, they had huge manufacturing areas where they would actually take English wool, which was a big product at the time, and process it into yarn for the English, and they had a big economic exchange going back and forth. So they actually mutually agreed on that. Whereas the French later on would actually go to them and say, you actually stand to make more money by aligning with us than being against us. And so the Burgundians actually have agreed to ally with the French in the later runs. Now, they allied with England originally, but the French also, the biggest and the most important person, don't get me wrong, Edward the Black Prince is cool. Don't get me wrong, Henry V is a really cool guy. Henry IV is actually even better. The biggest thing about it, though, is... Oh, wait. So, you see where it says 1337 right here? So, the plague made landfall in 1347 in Europe. So, that also kind of made it so, last a heck of a lot longer than everybody expected, right? So, because everybody was just kind of, dead for a little while. So, anyway, the French also, though, were inspired by some very influential figure. Y'all actually know her. You've heard her name before. That's right. Anybody want to take a guess? Well, anybody? What? Very nice job, Emily Kuhn. I heard you over there. Joan of Arc, right? So Joan of Arc is actually one of the most influential figures from this war, and a lot of y'all have actually probably heard her name before. And some of you are like, I haven't heard her name before at all. Why does Mr. Terry think I know things? Well, let's talk about her then really quick. So where am I going to put my face? I'm going to... because I want you to be able to see Joan, too. This is getting ridiculous. All right, so we'll just go like this... All right, there we go. She's just kind of subtly looking over top of my head. Now, Joan of Arc, not even actually her legit real name, right? Give me 1 second. I'm getting a phone call. Hi, sweetheart. I'm good. I'm flipping right now. Can I call you in a little bit? Okay, love you. Bye. So anyway, stats on her. 19 at the age of death. So very young, influential figure. Joan of Arc, not actually her name. Her French name is actually like Joan, something like that. But everybody who speaks English actually refers to as Joan, right? And Arc is actually the region where her father was originally from, even though they ended up losing land and things like that later on. But we refer to her as the illustrious Joan of Arc, right? She was born to a peasant family, not super poor, though. They actually owned a little bit of their own land, right? They actually it is believed that they made about an average of 200 pounds a year, right? So which is a comfortable living for somebody, but not a noble. So, and really honestly, back in the day, were you anything but a noble or a peasant? No, there was no middle class during the Middle Ages, right? Ironically enough. So really quick though, getting into it. She began to hear voices from God and saints at the age of about 13 years old. Now, some historians have actually gone back and they believe that she might have had some type of form of genetic epilepsy or schizophrenia, and that might have actually led her to hearing these things. Or, I say, maybe it was God, who knows? So now, she took a vow of chastity at the age of 13 and told her voices that she would actually commit herself to the noble pursuit of God's will. Now, funny enough, if you take a vow of chastity, though, that means you can't get married, right? I know this looks weird, but I'm turning my plant. So you can't get married if you take a vow of chastity. And then her father actually to try and get her to stop being kind of all over the place, decides, I'm going to arrange her a marriage, right, when she turns 16. Well, she actually avoids it and ducks it and then goes to a judge and is like, I don't want to get married. I want to become a nun. And he's like, all right, fine. And he actually lets her avoid it. So look at your girl go, right? So look at her go. Now, what she's going to end up doing, though, is when the 100 Years' War breaks out and France is just getting ransacked and her father's family actually loses a bunch of land to this entire war and to the English, she decides that God wants me to lead France to victory, right? So she decides following that to cut her hair, dress like a guy, and actually spend 11 days trying to go to Prince Charles's castle because at the time, Prince Charles, who was the rightful heir to the French throne, wasn't allowed to be coronated in the city of Reims because it was actually owned by the English. And this guy named Henry V at the time actually claimed the throne of France and England, saying, I own both parts, even though technically he hadn't taken over the entirety of France. So there was still a large chunk of France that was very loyal to the old French kingdom and was like, oh no, Charles of Valois, you are the one that we want, right? Croissant, right? All that stuff. Some of the French person's going to see this and get very offended. I just think, like, some of the words that y'all have are really awesome. Now, that's what it is. So, local judge actually didn't want to listen to her. So she spends 11 days trying to walk to find Charles, right? She finds a judge and says, I need to have, like, a conference with the king, and he says no. So she ends up waiting around for, like, almost a year before he actually finally allows her to try and speak to Charles. So Charles hears word of these of this woman trying to find him, saying that she's heard the voice of God and stuff like that. So there are two separate stories about how she convinced him to listen to her. One is that she came into like a mass or a grand hall meeting, and that he was actually dressed as like a peasant person, not as the king, and then there was an imposter on the throne, and then she walked up to the throne, was like, you're not my king, and then turns to the crowd and sees him wearing a funny hat and goes like, that's my king right there. There's that story, and then the other story is that they had a private conversation, and she somehow told him facts about himself that only a person that would be able to hear God would know. So that's why I have convinced, right? So convinced by Joan that she had heard the voice of God. So what he decides to do, he's like, all right, fine. I'll give you an army, I'll give you a horse, and I'll give you some other stuff, and I will allow you to go march forward to the city of Orleans, right? Where it's actually, or like we say Orleans, 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 I don't know how they say it. But Charles granted her an army, right? Grants her an army, and she rolls up just being just a straight thug about it because she has a huge victory in Orleans. Actually, it is believed that she inspired the troops after they began to falter. Some accounts say that she was actually inside the battle with them, leading them forward, charging the English with a lance of her own, right? Just being a straight up about it. And other historians are like, oh, you know, well, she was kind of a gimmick and stuff like that, which is like, come on, man. Let me think that she was being awesome. You know what I mean? So, also, though, the one thing she did, though, her outfit was so icy. Like, it was ridiculous. That's right. I know Nigel right now is freaking out because of that joke. Now, she wore white armor and rode a white horse looking iced out like it was going out of style. Oh, man. It's a good look, you know what I mean? Like, every uniform I've seen whenever a sports team's got white, looks amazing. So, now, it gets really dirty really easily, though. So what ends up happening, though, is after that huge victory in Orleans, okay, she actually leads Charles to the city of Reims, which is right on the outside, and he is crowned king in front of his people. He reclaims the throne because of this woman that actually has led his army to many victories. Now, unfortunately, though, what ends up happening, though, she's going to be captured outside of Paris, right, after winning a lot of battles against the English, a lot of small skirmishes and stuff. Fun fact about this, though, she actually wasn't even captured by the English at all. She was actually captured by the Burgundians, those people that were loyal, that are French, but were loyal to the English for a little while. And they actually threatened the French. They were like, look, we caught her. Give us some money and we'll give her back. And they were like, no, we don't want to do that. And then they sold her off to the English, right? The English also particularly were not as upset with her about winning battles. They were like really upset about the heretical value of her statement saying that she had heard God, because that would make them seem as the supposed enemy of the Lord. But also the other big thing they were just irately upset about was the cross-dressing. Like, so the English put her on trial for over 70 different charges, right? So witchcraft, heresy, and cross-dressing being the biggest ones out of all of them. So what they end up making her do is they force her to sign a document saying that she actually never heard the voice of God, and also saying that she promises never to wear men's clothing again, right? So funny thing about it, though, is she did end up signing the document because she was forced to. They were like, we're going to end up killing you if you don't do this, so just do it. So the word on the street, though, is that she actually signed it, and she kept hearing voices, right? So she lied when she signed it. And then also the word on the street goes that even after being told not to cross-dress, she did it again because she claims that she was being like harassed by the guards inside the prison. And also that she was being told by her voices to actually keep doing it. So she cross-dresses again after being told not to. And due to this heretical, like, big pushback against the English, what's going to end up happening is she is burned at the stake at the age of 19, which I feel like is a really, really bad way to go. But her biggest contributions to history is the fact that she is now considered the patron saint of France. She went, oh, wow, whoa, where are we going? Where are we going? What is going on? Come on, we got this. There we go. So she was canonized by Pope Benedict the 15th in 1920 and is the patron saint of France, right? She was also they were losing battle after battle until she showed up on the scene. So there's a chance that had she not actually been involved, maybe the French never would have won, right? Even though I do think the cannons and the guns do have a really big reason to do with it. But that's it. That's the flip for the weekend. So I hope y'all enjoyed it, and we will talk about my favorite thing to talk about on Monday, the Black Death. So we will get everything orchestrated about this week. Now, there is a chance that we won't be able to do like a review game due to the fact that this retreat stuff is just kind of throwing a major wrench into the entire thing. But we'll talk about that later on, all right? I'll see you guys after a while. See you on Monday. Have a great weekend.